The spreadsheet glowed in the dim light of Maria's home office, a neat grid of numbers that should have been simple. But simple wasn't the word for it tonight. Her finger traced a line across the screen. Check number 3057, paid to Green Thumb Landscaping. Normal enough. But then, a few lines down, check number 3057 again, paid to a different company, Evergreen Solutions. The amount was identical. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Where was the invoice for Evergreen? She scrolled through the digital files. Nothing. Just a ghost entry in the ledger. Welcome to Willow Ridge, one of those picture-perfect suburban communities where the biggest drama is usually whose turn it is to clean the community pool skimmers. We're a small, tight-knit neighborhood of about 100 homes. Everyone pays their monthly HOA dues, $200 on the dot. It covers landscaping, pool maintenance, and the occasional community barbecue. It's not a fortune, but it adds up. And for the past year, I, Maria, have been on the finance committee. It's a volunteer gig, mostly just double-checking the treasurer's work to keep everything transparent. Our treasurer is Richard, a retired accountant who's been handling the books for as long as anyone can remember. He's meticulous, a bit old school, but everyone trusts him. Lena is our HOA president. She's all about community spirit and organizing potlucks. She leaves the numbers to Richard and me. Then there's Omar, my next-door neighbor. He's the type who reads every line of the monthly newsletter and isn't afraid to ask questions at the annual meeting. He's always worried the board is spending too much on mulch. So, back to the ledger. This wasn't just a simple typo. 2 checks, same number, different payees. It felt wrong. I pulled up the scanned check images Richard had provided. There it was, check 3057 to Green Thumb Landscaping, perfectly normal. But there was no image for the second check 3057, the one to Evergreen Solutions. I did a quick search for Evergreen Solutions. No website, no local business listing, no address, just a P.O. box in the next state over. A landscaping company with no physical address? That set off another alarm bell. Landscapers have trucks, equipment, a home base. A P.O. box felt transient, evasive. I started digging deeper, my initial annoyance turning into genuine concern. I cross-referenced the payments for the last 6 months. And there it was again. A different check number, but the same pattern. A legitimate payment to a known local vendor, and then a duplicate check number for the same amount to another vague, untraceable company. Sunrise Pool Care had a duplicate going to Crystal Clear Services. Our regular handyman's payment was mirrored by one to Apex Home Repairs. All these ghost companies had P.O. box addresses in different towns. My heart was pounding now. This was more than a bookkeeping error. This was a deliberate pattern. I had to talk to Richard. Maybe there was a simple explanation I was missing. I'm just a volunteer, after all. He's the professional. I found him the next morning near the community mailboxes collecting his letters. "Richard, good morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey, Maria, beautiful day, isn't it?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It is," I agreed. "Listen, I was going over the ledger last night, and I had a couple of questions. I was wondering if you could send me the original electronic bank statements for the last few months. The scanned copies are a bit blurry, and I just want to cross-reference a few things to be sure." His smile tightened. "The bank statements? Maria, I've been doing this for 10 years. The reconciled ledger I send you has everything you need. It's all balanced. Why create extra work? The digital copies are perfectly fine for an audit." He was being dismissive, almost paternalistic. "I know, Richard, and I appreciate all your hard work. It's just a formality for my own records. The committee guidelines suggest we review original source documents, you know?" I tried to keep my tone light, friendly. He shuffled his mail and looked away. "Look, the bank's online portal is a nightmare to navigate. It's easier if I just manage it. Don't you worry your head about it. Everything is in perfect order. I promise." He gave me a brisk nod and walked off toward his house, leaving me standing on the sidewalk. "Don't you worry your head about it." The words echoed in my mind, no longer sounding reassuring but like a warning. He wasn't just deflecting, he was stonewalling. He was actively preventing me from seeing the original statements. Why? The only reason to hide the originals is if they don't match the ledger he created. I walked home, my mind racing. Richard's refusal was the final piece of the puzzle. He was hiding something big. The duplicate checks, the phantom vendors, the out-of-state P.O. boxes. It all pointed to one ugly conclusion. Someone was stealing from the HOA, from all of us, from our neighbors. But who would believe me? Richard was a pillar of the community. Lena, our president, trusted him implicitly. If I went to her with just a spreadsheet and a hunch, Richard could easily explain it away as a misunderstanding, making me look like a paranoid troublemaker. I couldn't go to the board. Not yet. I needed undeniable proof. I stood in my office, looking at the spreadsheet again. The numbers weren't just numbers anymore. They were a breadcrumb trail. And I realized I was the only one who had noticed it. If I didn't follow it, who would? This wasn't about HOA dues anymore. It was about trust, and about a man who everyone thought they knew. I had to go on, but I had to be careful. I decided right then and there I would conduct my own quiet investigation. I would find the truth, no matter where it led. My little volunteer gig on the finance committee had just become a whole lot more serious. Willow Ridge had a secret, and I was going to uncover it. Thank you for watching. If this story has you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. All right, let's just get this straight. I'm no detective. I'm just Maria, your friendly neighborhood HOA board member, the one who actually reads the meeting minutes. But lately, something's been feeling off. The numbers just aren't adding up. So, I decided to do a little digging of my own. Nothing official, just a quiet look into our community's finances. It all started with the bylaws. I wanted to understand the rules, the checks and balances we're supposed to have in place. I spent hours buried in paperwork, my dining table covered in binders and printouts. I was looking for our audit rules, our financial policies, specifically the dual signature requirement for checks. It's standard procedure, right? To prevent any one person from having too much control. And we have it. On paper, at least. Every check over $500 is supposed to be signed by 2 board members. Simple. Except, when I started cross-referencing, things got weird. That's when I moved on to the vendor records. At first, it was just small things, little inconsistencies that could easily be dismissed as typos. A vendor named Oakwood Landscaping one month and Oakwad Landscaping the next. A payment to Smith's Plumbing and another to Smith's Plumbing. On their own, they meant nothing. Just sloppy bookkeeping, maybe. But there were so many of them. It felt less like a mistake and more like a pattern. A deliberate attempt to muddy the waters. Then came the reimbursements. I found a whole series of them, all filed under miscellaneous supplies. No receipts, no itemized lists, just vague descriptions and even amounts like $500 exactly. Who spends exactly $500 on miscellaneous supplies, month after month? It felt too neat, too clean. I also noticed altered dates on some of the invoices. A 3 clumsily written over a 2, a smudge of whiteout trying to hide something. It was like pulling at a thread on a sweater and the whole thing was starting to unravel. The next morning I was grabbing my mail when I bumped into Omar from Unit 3B. He's lived here forever, knows everyone and everything. We got to talking, and I casually mentioned the landscaping budget. His eyes lit up. "You know," he said, leaning in, "it's funny you mention that. Remember that guy, Dave? From Green Thumb Landscapers? He used to be here every Tuesday like clockwork. Then about 6 months ago, he just stopped coming. Now we have this new crew. They're fine, I guess, but I haven't seen Dave since." A landscaper who just disappeared? That was odd. I thanked Omar for the tip, my mind racing. Back inside, I pulled up the payment records. Sure enough, we were still paying Green Thumb Landscapers. Same amount, every single month. But if Dave wasn't coming, who was cashing the checks? My stomach twisted into a knot. This was bigger than just sloppy paperwork. This was starting to feel like real fraud. My next step was to look at the archived bank statements. I needed to see the actual cashed checks, to see who was endorsing them. According to our bylaws, those records should be readily available to any board member. So I sent a polite email to Richard, our treasurer. "Hi, Richard," I wrote. "Hope you're well. Could you please send me the archived bank statements for the last 12 months? Just doing some routine review." Simple, right? Richard's reply came almost immediately. "Of course, Maria. Happy to help. I'm a bit swamped right now, but I'll get them to you as soon as I can." A day went by, then two. I sent a gentle follow-up. "No problem, Richard," he replied. "Just waiting on the bank to send them over. Their online portal is being difficult." His excuses were becoming more and more elaborate. The bank's portal was down. He had to request physical copies. The mail was slow. Every time I asked, there was a new delay, a new reason he couldn't get me the documents. The more he stalled, the more convinced I became that he was hiding something. The tension was getting to me. I was losing sleep, jumping at every email notification. Was I being paranoid? Was I making a huge deal out of nothing? Or was Richard deliberately stonewalling me? This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. I felt like I was in a spy movie, except the stakes were my neighbor's hard-earned money. After a week of his excuses, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I remembered we get quarterly summary reports mailed to the HOA's P.O. box. I still had the key. So, I drove down to the post office, my heart pounding in my chest. I found the latest quarterly packet and tore it open right there in my car. It wasn't the full statements I needed, but it included copies of all checks issued over a certain amount. And that's when I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. It was a check, dated 2 months prior, made out to a company I'd never heard of, Strategic Solutions, LLC. The amount was for $12,400. $12,000. The memo line was blank. I frantically searched through all the invoices and expense reports I had. There was no matching invoice, no proposal, no contract, no record of any work done by a Strategic Solutions, LLC. Nothing. And the signature? It was just one. Richard's. A $12,000 check with no backup documentation, no second signature, and a recipient that didn't exist in any of our vendor files. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was the proof. This wasn't a typo or a misplaced receipt. This was a massive, glaring red flag. The quiet investigation was over. Now, I had to figure out what to do with what I'd found. Thanks so much for watching me go down this rabbit hole. It's been a wild ride, and it's far from over. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss an update. The city council meeting felt off. It always did these days. The numbers on the screen looked clean, but the feeling in the room was anything but. I'm Maria, and for months, I've been poring over our town's public records, trying to understand where our money was really going. The official documents, all neat PDFs, told one story. But the whispers in the community, the delayed projects, the budget shortfalls, they told another. I knew something was hidden, buried under layers of digital paperwork, and I was determined to find it. That night, scrolling through another set of invoices for the community center renovation, my eyes started to blur. Page after page of contractor fees, material costs, all approved, all seemingly legitimate. I was about to give up, to close the laptop and admit defeat. But then, I saw it. A faint, almost invisible mark in the corner of one of the PDFs. I zoomed in, and again, it was a watermark, a logo for a local business, Speedy Print and Ship. Why would a major construction contractor's invoice have a watermark from a local print shop? It made no sense. This wasn't some mom-and-pop operation. This was a multi-million-dollar project. Their invoices should be professionally generated, not run off at the corner copy store. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me. This was it. This was the loose thread. The next morning, my heart was pounding as I dialed the number for speedy print and ship. An older gentleman with a warm, gravelly voice answered. I explained I was a resident looking into some public records and had a quick question about an invoice template. I described the watermark. He chuckled. Oh yeah, that old thing. We haven't used that logo in years. But folks around here, they know our work. We designed a basic invoice template for a few local businesses a while back. Just something simple they could fill in themselves. Do you remember who you made it for? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Let me think, he said. I could hear him shuffling papers. Made one for Garcia and Sons Plumbing, another for Oakwood Landscaping. Oh, and Apex Construction. Yeah, a fellow named Henderson started that one. Apex Construction. That was the name on the invoice. But the name he mentioned, Henderson. I checked the city's business registry. The registered owner of Apex Construction was a man named Peterson, not Henderson. My mind raced. Was it possible? Sir, I said, this might sound strange, but have any other companies used that exact same invoice template recently, maybe under a different name? There was a pause. You know, it's funny you ask. A few months back, a different company, Summit Builders, came in. They had the exact same file. Said their friend from Apex gave it to them. Then a month later, another one, Pinnacle Contracting. Same story, same template. We just print what they bring us, you know? Summit Builders, Pinnacle Contracting. I recognized those names. They'd both been awarded smaller city contracts in the last year. 3 different companies, all using the same invoice template from a local print shop, all connected by a man named Henderson, who wasn't the registered owner of any of them. This wasn't just a loose thread anymore. I was starting to unravel the whole sweater. The print shop call had opened a new door. Now I had 3 company names, Apex, Summit, and Pinnacle. I pulled up every invoice they had submitted to the city. Side by side, they were identical, save for the company name at the top. The formatting, the font, even a specific typo in the terms and conditions section was the same across all 3. It was sloppy, arrogant even. They thought no one was looking closely enough to notice. But invoices are just one side of the story. I needed to follow the money. I filed a public records request for the corresponding bank deposit slips for every payment made to these 3 companies. The city's finance department fought me on it, citing privacy concerns, but the law was on my side. These were public funds. After a week of bureaucratic stonewalling, the documents finally landed in my inbox. At first glance, everything looked normal. The city's checks were deposited into accounts under the respective company names. But as I traced the money further, a pattern emerged. Within 24 hours of each deposit, large round sums were transferred out. The transfers weren't going to suppliers or subcontractors, they were routed, hopping from one account to another, getting smaller each time until they landed in a series of shell accounts with generic names like Asset Management Group and Enterprise Holdings. These accounts had no business history, no physical address, just a P.O. box. It was a classic money laundering scheme designed to obscure the final destination of our tax dollars. I compiled everything I had, the watermarked invoices, the testimony from the print shop owner, the identical invoice templates, and the convoluted trail of bank transfers. The evidence was overwhelming. It was time to bring this to the board. The emergency board meeting was tense. I presented my findings, laying out the paper trail step by step. The room was silent as I connected the dots between the 3 seemingly separate companies and the shell accounts. Lena, a newer board member who had always been a quiet ally, looked horrified. This is unbelievable, Maria," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "We have to launch a formal investigation. We have to freeze these contracts immediately." "If what you're saying is true, this is outright fraud." She urged caution, suggesting we hire an independent forensic accountant to verify my findings before going public. She was right to be careful. Accusations like these could tear the community apart if we were wrong. But Richard, the long-standing board chair, just scoffed. He leaned back in his chair, a dismissive smile on his face. "Maria, with all due respect, you're seeing ghosts. It's a clerical error. A simple mistake." "A clerical error?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Richard, 3 different companies using the same invoice from a copy shop, all feeding money into the same web of shell accounts? That's not a clerical error. That's a criminal enterprise." "It's a coincidence," he insisted, his tone condescending. "Smaller contractors often share resources. It's efficient. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. These are reputable businesses." "Reputable businesses that don't exist outside of these documents," I said, holding up the printouts of the empty shell company records. "There's nothing here. No employees, no offices, no equipment." The argument went back and forth. Lena supported my call for an investigation, but others on the board sided with Richard, wary of the political fallout. They wanted to handle it internally, to look into it, without causing a stir. I knew what that meant. It meant burying it. They were more afraid of the scandal than the crime itself. Richard concluded the meeting by tabling the discussion. "We will review the documents you've provided, Maria," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Thank you for your diligence." I walked out of that room feeling a cold fury. They weren't going to do anything. They were going to let it go. Richard's calm, his immediate and practiced dismissal. It was too smooth. He knew. He had to be involved. He was protecting them. He was protecting himself. The system I had trusted to protect the public was protecting the powerful instead. The board wouldn't act. The city officials were either complicit or intimidated. I looked at the folder in my hands, the product of countless sleepless nights. The evidence was all there, clear, undeniable. If the people in charge wouldn't listen, then I had to go to the people they were supposed to be serving. My community. They deserved to know the truth. They deserved to know how their trust and their money was being abused. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, the city lights twinkling outside, I made my decision. I wasn't just an accountant or a concerned citizen anymore. I was a whistleblower. I opened my laptop and began to type. I was going to lay out every piece of evidence, every invoice, every bank statement. I would schedule a community town hall outside the official channels. I would present my findings directly to my neighbors, the people who actually paid the bills. It was a risk. I would be making powerful enemies. But the paper trail was clear, and it led to a truth that had to be told. The board meeting was over, but this was far from finished. It was just the beginning. Thank you so much for watching this journey unfold. If you believe in transparency and holding power accountable, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the air in the clubhouse was thick, not just with the heat of 100 bodies crammed into a space meant for 50, but with something heavier. A mix of frustration, anger, and a desperate hope for change. This wasn't just any meeting. This was a reckoning. For weeks, whispers had turned into worried conversations into organized phone calls. Now it had all culminated here, in this packed room. Maria stood at the front, a simple microphone in hand, her face a mask of calm determination. She had organized this town hall, a last-ditch effort to get answers. She looked out at the faces staring back at her, retirees who had poured their life savings into this community. Young parents who had chosen this place to raise their children, all of them united by a growing sense of betrayal. The board sat at a long table, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to outright hostile. They had expected a few disgruntled residents, not this overwhelming wave of unified dissent. They had underestimated the community's resolve. An elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson, was the first to speak. His voice trembled, not from age, but from emotion. "I've lived here for 20 years, he began, leaning on his cane. We were promised a community. We were promised security. Now." The walking paths are crumbling, the security patrols are gone, and the pool, our grandkids' favorite spot, has been closed for maintenance for 6 months. Where is the money going? We pay our dues every single month without fail. Where is our money going? His words hung in the air, a question that echoed in everyone's heart. He sat down to a wave of supportive applause. Next came a young mother, clutching her daughter's hand. "My daughter scraped her knee on the playground last week," she said, her voice tight with anger. "On a rusty, broken swing set that we've reported 3 times. 3 times! Are you waiting for a serious injury before you do something? We moved here because it was supposed to be safe for our kids. What happened to that promise?" The testimonies continued, each one a painful brushstroke on a larger canvas of neglect and broken trust. Story after story of essential services disappearing, of maintenance requests ignored, of a community slowly decaying while the fees kept rising. The board members shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact, their usual placating smiles now looking like sneers. When the last resident had spoken, a heavy silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Maria. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of her neighbor's stories settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We've all heard the stories. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern of mismanagement and a complete lack of transparency." She gestured to a large screen behind her. A spreadsheet appeared, meticulously compiled from public records and leaked documents. "I've spent the last 3 months analyzing the community's financials, or at least what little has been made public. What I've found are inconsistencies, vague expenditures, contracts awarded without competitive bids, substantial funds allocated to miscellaneous administrative costs with no itemization." She walked the audience through the numbers, explaining each anomaly with cool, methodical precision. There was no hysteria in her voice, only the undeniable logic of the data. "We have a right to know how our money is being spent. We have a right to accountability." The board chairman, a man named Mr. Davies, finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ms. Garcia, while we appreciate your passion," he said, the word sounding like an insult, "you are not an accountant. These are complex financial matters best left to the professionals." A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Maria held up a hand for silence. "You are absolutely right, Mr. Davies. I am not an accountant, which is precisely why I am formally requesting, on behalf of this community, that the board authorize a full, independent, external audit." The room erupted in applause and shouts of "Audit! Audit!" Davies slammed his gavel, but the sound was lost in the noise. "This is not how we do things. There's a process. A motion must be submitted in writing," he stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "We have the motion right here," a man shouted from the back, holding up a signed petition with dozens of signatures. The board was cornered. They looked at each other, a silent, panicked communication passing between them. They could see the cameras recording, the determined faces, the sheer number of people they had ignored for too long. To refuse now would be an admission of guilt. The pressure was immense, a physical force pressing down on them. Davies, looking defeated, finally sighed. "Fine," he grumbled through gritted teeth. "All in favor of commissioning an external audit?" Every hand in the room, save for those at the board's table, shot into the air. It was a tidal wave of democracy in action. The motion passed, not by a vote, but by an overwhelming popular mandate. The board had been forced to bend to the will of the people they were supposed to serve. The next few days were a blur of activity. The community, energized by their victory, formed a selection committee. They vetted several firms looking for someone with a reputation for being thorough, unshakable, and completely independent. They found her in Claire Thompson. Claire was a forensic auditor with eyes that seemed to see right through spreadsheets and into the heart of the matter. She had a reputation for digging up financial truths that others wanted to keep buried. The final scene of this chapter unfolded not in the crowded clubhouse, but in a small, quiet office. Maria and two other residents sat across from Claire, a mountain of financial binders stacked between them. Claire picked up the top binder, her expression serious. "Okay," she said, her voice calm, but with an undercurrent of steel. "Let's find out where the money went." She opened the cover and the investigation began. The community had won the first battle, but everyone knew the real fight was just starting. Thank you so much for watching this journey unfold. It just goes to show what a community can do when they stand together. If you want to see what Claire uncovers in her investigation, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have those notifications turned on. Hit that like button if you believe in the power of the people. The air in the community hall was thick with a tension you could cut with a knife. For months, whispers and rumors had circulated about our HOA's finances. Missing funds, shoddy repairs, and evasive answers from the board had turned our once peaceful neighborhood into a hotbed of suspicion. But tonight, the whispers would turn into a full-blown roar. This is the story of how a forensic audit ripped the friendly mask off our community and exposed a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. It all began when Claire, a retired accountant who lived on a quiet cul-de-sac, took the stage. She adjusted her glasses, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a thick binder. This was the forensic audit report, the result of weeks of her poring over every single transaction our HOA had made for the past 5 years. The room fell silent. "As you know," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "we engaged in this audit due to significant discrepancies in our financial records. What I found is a coordinated and deliberate scheme to embezzle funds." A collective gasp swept through the room. Claire didn't mince words. She laid it all out with chilling precision. She projected documents onto the screen behind her, bank statements, invoices, and checks. She pointed to a series of unauthorized disbursements, large sums of money moved without the required board approval. "These payments," she explained, "were made to several shell companies." She then showed us the incorporation documents for these companies. The addresses were just P.O. boxes, and the directors were names nobody recognized. But the real bombshell was who had authorized the payments. Every single check, every single wire transfer was tied back to one person, our long-serving, seemingly trustworthy treasurer, Richard. The evidence was damning. Claire presented examples of forged signatures from other board members, cleverly copied onto documents to give the illusion of legitimacy. She showed us inflated invoices for landscaping services that were never fully rendered and contracts for phantom consulting services. The scheme was intricate. Money was funneled from our reserve funds into these shell companies, then quickly moved to other accounts, making it difficult to trace. The total amount was staggering, well into the 6 figures. Money that was supposed to be for our new playground, for road repairs, for the very upkeep of our homes. The room was a mixture of stunned silence and angry muttering. People who had known Richard for years, who had shared barbecues and holiday parties with him, looked at each other in disbelief. Maria and Lena, the two residents who had spearheaded the push for the audit, didn't waste a moment. They had been fighting this battle for months, often facing ridicule and accusations of being troublemakers. Seeing the hard evidence vindicated them, but their faces were grim. The next morning, they walked into the local police station, the audit report in hand, and filed a formal complaint. The wheels of justice, which had seemed so distant, began to turn with surprising speed. Within a week, the district attorney's office had taken an interest. Subpoenas were issued not just to Richard, but to the banks and the so-called companies he had created. Investigators began knocking on doors, asking questions, and piecing together the full extent of the fraud. The fallout in the neighborhood was immediate and divisive. Our community Facebook group, once a place for lost pets and bake sale announcements, became a digital battleground. One camp rallied fiercely around Richard. "He would never do this," one neighbor wrote. Richard has volunteered his time for a decade. This is a witch hunt led by a few disgruntled homeowners. They pointed to his years of service, his friendly demeanor, and argued it must be a misunderstanding, a case of sloppy bookkeeping, not criminal intent. They accused Claire, Maria, and Lena of tearing the community apart for personal reasons. The comments were vicious, personal, and they fractured long-standing friendships. On the other side, a growing wave of anger demanded accountability. "A misunderstanding? He forged signatures," another resident countered. The evidence was undeniable for them. They demanded the immediate resignation of the entire board, arguing that their lack of oversight allowed this to happen for years. They either knew and were complicit, or they were so incompetent they shouldn't be managing a lemonade stand, let alone our life savings. The calls for resignations grew louder at impromptu gatherings on street corners and in heated email chains. The trust that holds a community together had completely evaporated. We were no longer neighbors. We were factions. Caught in the escalating firestorm, Richard finally broke his silence. He submitted a letter of resignation from his position as treasurer, effective immediately. But his letter was far from an admission of guilt. He maintained his innocence, claiming he was a victim of a complex smear campaign. He insisted that any financial irregularities were simply errors, the result of his lack of formal accounting experience, and not a deliberate attempt to steal. He portrayed himself as a well-meaning volunteer who was now being unfairly crucified. But his denial rang hollow for many, especially when, just 2 weeks later, the district attorney's office held a press conference. The grand jury had returned its verdict. Richard was being indicted on multiple felony charges, including grand larceny, embezzlement, and forgery. The announcement sent a final shockwave through the community. The legal battle had officially begun. As part of the proceedings, all of our HOA's bank accounts were frozen by court order. This created a whole new set of problems. The landscaping company stopped coming, the pool maintenance was halted, and urgent repairs were put on indefinite hold. Our neighborhood, once pristine, started to look neglected, a physical manifestation of the chaos within. Investigators managed to locate and freeze some of the stolen funds, recovering a partial amount from one of Richard's hidden accounts. It was a small victory, but it felt insignificant. The recovery was a fraction of what was taken, and the rest was likely gone, spent, or hidden in a complex web of accounts that lawyers would now spend years and a fortune of our money trying to untangle. Our HOA was now facing a long and costly litigation process. We had to hire expensive attorneys not only to sue Richard, but also to defend the HOA against potential lawsuits from residents who claimed the board's negligence had caused them financial harm. The community that once felt like a family was now broken, facing a future of legal battles, financial strain, and deep-seated mistrust. The true cost of the betrayal wasn't just in the dollars and cents stolen from our accounts, but in the trust and harmony that had been shattered, perhaps forever. This story is a stark reminder of the importance of transparency and accountability in any community organization. It shows how easily trust can be exploited and how devastating the consequences can be. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into real-life dramas. Stay safe and always ask questions. So, what exactly went wrong? In short, a lack of oversight allowed for a serious misuse of funds. The trust that holds a community together was shattered, but Willow Ridge didn't just collapse. They got to work. Their first step was to overhaul their entire financial system. They've implemented what I call the trust but verify model. Let's break it down. First up, dual signatures. It sounds simple, but it's a powerful tool. Now, any check, any payment, any transfer over a small pre-approved amount requires 2 signatures from 2 separate board members. This immediately prevents any single person from having unilateral control over the community's money. It's a basic check and balance that should be standard practice in every HOA. Next, they've instituted mandatory quarterly audits performed by an independent third-party accounting firm, not annually, but every 3 months. This means that any discrepancies are caught almost immediately, not a year later when the damage is already done. These audits aren't just a formality. The full report is presented to the community at an open meeting, giving every resident the chance to review the numbers and ask questions. And perhaps the most radical step they've taken is the creation of a public ledger. It's a simplified, easy-to-read version of the HOA's income and expenses, updated monthly and posted online in a resident-only portal. You can see where every dollar of your dues is going, from landscaping contracts to pool chemicals. This level of transparency is revolutionary. It's about treating homeowners like what they are, stakeholders in a shared investment. It replaces suspicion with information, and that's the foundation of rebuilding trust. Of course, rebuilding isn't just about spreadsheets and new rules. It's about bringing the community back to life. I was there for the grand reopening of the community pool. For over a year, it sat empty, a constant reminder of the problems they were facing. Seeing kids splashing and families laughing again, it was more than just a pool party. It was a symbol of return to normalcy. You could feel the collective sigh of relief. Then, as winter approached, another milestone. The previous year, the beloved holiday light display was canceled to save money, which really dampened spirits. This year, volunteers got together. They untangled old lights, fundraised for new ones, and spent a whole weekend decorating the neighborhood entrance and community center. It wasn't about the lights themselves, but about the act of coming together to create something beautiful again. It showed that the spirit of Willow Ridge was still very much alive. The board also recognized that good intentions aren't enough. They organized training sessions for all current and future volunteer board members, covering financial literacy, legal responsibilities, and conflict resolution. It's an investment in their people, ensuring that anyone who steps up to serve has the knowledge and tools to do so effectively and ethically. This is about creating a culture of competence and accountability from the ground up. Now, let's talk about the legal side of things, because that's a huge piece of this puzzle. Where does the restitution stand? The process is, unfortunately, slow. Lawyers for the homeowners have been in intense negotiations to recover the misappropriated funds. They've managed to secure a tentative settlement, which is a major victory. This agreement lays out a payment plan, a timeline for when the community can expect to see that money returned to its accounts. However, it's not a complete resolution just yet. This settlement covers the core financial losses, but there is still some remaining litigation tied to secondary damages and legal fees. The community's legal team is cautiously optimistic, but they're preparing for a long road ahead. The key takeaway here is that legal justice takes time and persistence. For the residents of Willow Ridge, seeing a concrete plan for restitution has been a critical step in feeling that accountability is being taken seriously. To help us all learn from this, I spoke with Maria, the new HOA board president at Willow Ridge. She's been at the forefront of these reforms, and she shared some incredibly practical advice for anyone living in an HOA. Here's Maria. Hi, everyone. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't afford to be a passive homeowner. You have to be engaged. So, what are the red flags you should watch out for? First, a lack of transparency. If your board is hesitant to share financial documents or if meetings are consistently canceled or held without proper notice, that's a major warning sign. Second, watch for a single board member who seems to have all the power or makes decisions unilaterally. Healthy organizations have shared responsibilities. Another red flag is a sudden, unexplained increase in dues or special assessments, especially if there's no clear project or budget attached to it. So what can you do? Start by attending meetings. Read the minutes. Know who is on your board. You have the right to request financial records. Your governing documents will outline the exact procedure, but typically, a written request to the board is all it takes. If they refuse, it might be time to rally your neighbors and consult a lawyer who specializes in HOA law. The best way to protect your community is to prevent a crisis before it starts. Insist on regular independent audits, advocate for policies like dual signatures, and most importantly, volunteer if you can. Be part of the solution. It's your community and your investment. Protect it. Thanks, Maria. Her experience is invaluable. The final step in this journey for Willow Ridge is the ongoing process of rebuilding that fragile neighborhood trust. I saw Maria, after their first quarterly audit, personally posting the summary and the link to the full public ledger on the community bulletin board. It was a simple act, but it was powerful. A promise kept. The atmosphere in Willow Ridge is different now. It's not blindly optimistic. It's cautiously hopeful. Neighbors are talking to each other again, not with suspicion, but with a shared sense of purpose. They've been through a fire and have come out stronger, smarter, and more united. They are a testament to the fact that even after a profound breach of trust, a community can heal, rebuild, and create a better, more transparent future for everyone. Their story is a lesson for us all. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that empowers communities. We'd love to hear your own experiences or questions in the comments below. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.